Welcome to Canada Bangladesh Social Justice Action Research Alliance. On this platform, we talk about issues that impact social justice locally and globally. As we begin the conversation, often by this very important reminder that we use these conversations for creating critical consciousness among Bangladeshi young students, marginalized population around the world. What we strongly believe that in educational spaces, unfortunately, the opportunity for critical thinking is not sufficient. So we use these conversations. We request our guests to engage in conversations that are very accessible in everyday language. And I am super excited because Heryka and Margia, I mean, last time I talked to Margia's conversation became so popular. It's interesting that both Heryka's and Margia's conversation individually were some of the most important conversations, which many of the artists and general students, particularly young students, felt very relevant. They could relate to your conversations amazingly. So my guest today, Heryka Miranda. Heryka Miranda is a community cross-cultural educator and dance artist, and Margia Shiriti, artistic director and choreographer, Bangladesh Academy of Fine Arts in New York, and mental health counselor as a trainee she's being trained as a mental health professional. So today we will engage in a conversation how performing art, very popular and powerful performing art like dance, can it be used for creating critical consciousness? Can it be used for social justice education? I know I'm a huge fan of Heryka's work. Heryka has used dance for not only community work, she has used dance for research. She has done graduate research work where, and of course, we'll hear that beautiful story, very, very powerful story. At least, Heryka's work has transformed a lot of my consciousness. So with that, I welcome both Heryka and Margia to our conversation. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, hello, everybody.
Hi, thank you for having me again.
Thank you. So I'll start by asking first Heryka, and then I'll go to Margia. Is that, Heryka, how did you come to dance? Like, what was your journey from whatever you are doing growing up in America? Obviously our aspirations, become career oriented and all of that. You came to dance and you have done amazing through things in dance. How did you tell us about your journey, please?
Thank you. It's so good to see you, Feroz, too. We're also friends, so it's very nice to have this conversation with all of you and share it with Margia. And I'm glad that you're in New York. New York is a very special place in my heart. So my journey really is, I grew up in a working class Central American or Latin American immigrant neighborhood in White Plains, New York, until about the age of 11. And so I was surrounded by incredible nationalities, right? Different, like such a diverse group of folks, trying to, start a new life. And and there was always music there. And so I really loved the music and accompaniment with the foods, the various types of foods. And so the spices and the smells and the gatherings, it was just kind of commonplace that after you eat, you dance, right? And so the dances that I learned at a very young age was like merengue and salsa. And that just became my thing. And I was like, oh my God, it's just so many, like, it was like this incredible stew of all these, spices and, really, really yummy. And then my brother and I also were break dancers. And we made use of, like, we lived in apartment buildings and there were alleyways in between. So we made use of like sidewalk spaces and alleyways to dance with the kids and what we call battle, and learn about it, right? And have this incredible relationship with cement, right? And cardboard, and learn from each other, right? Like none of us went to class. I didn't learn like dance like from taking formal classes, not until later on in life. But it was really like kind of really embodying the environment around us. So I it was wonderful, and it was an incredible way to build this sense of belonging in the community with the other kids, the other children of immigrants themselves, or children of immigrants like my brother and I, because we were both born and raised in the States.
Wow, that is so powerful. I will ask you a few more questions on that. Now, Shiriti, if you please share your story of getting into dance.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Heryka, for sharing your story. I loved hearing it. It is the first time that I'm hearing it as well. And I'm just so happy to be a part of this conversation. There's a couple of things that actually Heryka mentioned that I found to be so amazing. Like the fact that there is that tradition of like after you eat, you dance. And I just love how in these other cultures that are non-Bengali, right, or non-Bangladeshi, there's this encouragement of dance, body movement, expression of sensuality and emotion that's more casual, right? That doesn't have to be on stage or systematized or of that sort. So I find that to be beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. So in terms of how I got into dance, my mom put me in when I was a kid. So I come from an immigrant background. We moved from Bangladesh to America in like 1986. I was about 14 months old. Haven't really gone back like that since, like maybe twice for like weddings, but I haven't been back to the degree where I'm very much assimilated into the Bangladeshi culture from the Bangladeshi resident perspective. Right. So I grew up in New York. Majority of my life I've been in the Bronx. I'm a Bronx girl. And as you know, Bronx is filled with talent and culture, but lacking of proper resources going to the right place, unfortunately. So when my mom did, she wanted me to, like, she saw like, oh, hey, I have a kid who like moves around, dances all day, is super energetic. What do I do with it? So let me put it in dance. So she used to take me to Queens, and it was deep into Queens at the time, wherever we were living. It took about 2 hours to get there, like all transportation considered, and then about 2 hours to come back. And we would do this every Sunday. And my mom was very dedicated to making sure that I was involved in something. But eventually, I got admitted into a pretty like decent high school. I'm not going to go into that, but like there's a whole story of that kind of interfering with my dance, because my parents definitely prioritized the fact that, oh, she got into a good high school, let's make sure academics is like the number one thing, and obviously arts comes after. I know Feroz is laughing because he knows this is like a tradition. It's not a tradition, it's a cultural thing, it's a norm, right? So I prioritized academia. I was like, I gotta be that A student. And I put dance in the back burner. Unfortunately, that didn't work for me because by that time, dance had become my passion. I already loved Bengali music. I loved music in general. I loved moving. I loved thinking critically and analytically. I was already completely moved by what dance could do to a kid, right? So at that point, I decided, okay, I'm going to just become more involved in this, besides just being a dancer. So at that point in time, my mom, alongside my dance teacher at the time, the late Unup Kumar Das, unfortunately, he had passed last year, lovely soul. So they had created a school called BAFA Inc., Bangladesh Academy of Fine Arts. And I also was a part of that founding community. And we administratively created this community where dance and singing, poetry, so on and so forth, was perpetuated, practiced, encouraged. And so that's how I came to where I am right now, where I do teach in multiple places. I am also dancing because I never want to stop. There's also this cultural aspect where, the reason why I appreciate Heryka's story so much is because in our story, you're expected to stop dancing after a certain milestone of life, specifically marriage, right? Or maybe for some people after puberty, it's like, okay, that's not necessary anymore. For me, that was not the case. I'm very lucky in that sense, where I don't have parents who encouraged that. They were like, yeah, you dance as long as you want. As long as your spine doesn't break, go for it, So that's my story, in brief. And yeah, thank you for letting me share it.
Margia shared something incredibly powerful in our last conversation. that stayed with me, and then subsequently I also had a conversation with one of my friends about it, is Margia was telling, and the reason why I was laughing when Margia said that, how in our, I think it's pretty much in all immigrant families, also in Bangladesh tremendously. I mean, I've been an educator over 20 years. And one of the things that it's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle. Um, Sriti said in our last conversation is that art, dance, it softens your soul. It makes you more kinder, compassionate person. We are educating. I don't know. I mean, we are. I mean, sometimes I think out of pain, out of sadness, I say it unapologetically. Is that as educators, we are training our kids to be competitive criminals. The values don't matter. It's all about career. It's all about money. It's all about. So, I mean, we instill it. I'm a teacher. I'm a parent. So I'm saying from that perspective. So if it was up to me, I would prioritize art, dance, performing art education way more important than probably doing maths or probably doing, I mean, maths comes later. And I'm saying this, and when I say this, again, I get into a lot of trouble for saying this. But look at us, what our education has got us into. Where have we come, right? So I know both of you have used dance as a performing art. Taking what Margia said in our last conversation is that art softens our soul. Uh, Heryka, how did you use dance to explore different social issues? And it was a powerful. I personally, you're a very dear friend, and I have learned so much from you. Is that in conversations that I have learned from you in everyday language, you often say embodied ways of knowing. You say it beautifully. I cannot. It teaches you things that when I read very dense, dry, dare I say, pretentious academic text, it doesn't touch my soul. At times I feel like it is at times I fear that it might also make me arrogant. So question to you that how did you use dance to explore social issues?
Thank you so much. Yeah, there's so much going in my head right now, especially like Margia, what you were saying about education and like putting education first. That wasn't necessarily it was important, like for us. That's why they came here. They want to have children born and raised in the States. They want to all this stuff. But because there was already like limited formal education in my mom and my dad, and particularly my mom, she had to learn how to navigate life in a society infused with racist and xenophobic attitudes and behaviors, right? So one of the beautiful things, and I love about my mom, I am here because of my mom. I am so, oof, she is such an incredible inspiration to me. She's always been. So when my brother and I were learning how to read in preschool, in kindergarten, she was right there too, learning how to read as well. And she had interrupted education, a formal education in Guatemala. And she has this incredible connection to the land. And both of my grandmothers were midwives. And so she taught me a lot, like in terms of your question for us about where does this this dance for social justice, or where does that come from? It's really embedded in these feelings of inferiority and not feeling enough. And I'm not a linear thinker. I've never been. I've been forced. To sever my head, right? And just like forget about the rest of my body. But I'm so grateful that I had those childhood experiences where I fell in love, deeply in love with the music and with what my body was saying. But when like coming towards or accompanying and dealing with prejudice bureaucracies and witnessing acts of discrimination against her and my community, particularly Central Americans, Mexicans, who are seen as like undocumented. You must be undocumented. The BS of like you're taking jobs away and dropouts, low literacy levels. Like it's like boom, 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 right? Like I grew up with these ideas about my community and it was really painful. And so I was like, holy shit, I can't, I can't ever get pregnant. Like, I don't like, my fear was like, oh my God, like, I can't get pregnant at a young age. Oh my God, because there's so many of us, and like, we're treated and seen like total and utter shit, you know? So I was afraid, right, of like being a stereotype and being a statistic. And it was awful because I also made judgments towards my own community. So through all of that, I was became very, very angry, but I didn't have the words to express it. It was just feelings that I had, like nervous sweats and like tense muscles and shallow breaths, because it was really hard to hear and be and exist. And sometimes I didn't want to exist. But what I did is like I went back to my first love, which was like the singing and the songs and the dances, right? And and then I started to really look into like the history of breakdance, right? And even salsa, right? Was just like they're all dances of resistance. They're dances that have come from migration, forced migrations, right? And so I really started kind of creating pieces and being and meeting just the right people that have just take me under their wings. Amazing choreographers. As soon as I started working, my money went towards taking dance classes, and I think I started taking official dance classes maybe around 15. And I just was like, it was so interesting how I just seamlessly like I just got it. I don't know how, but I didn't feel book smart. I was never like this A student. I had a lot of trouble reading. I was horrible in math. But there was something, the efficacy of movement and dance, and really deeply feeling emotion, was something that I didn't even know that was my gift. And really, being with and accompanying vulnerability. And what was something that just until later as an adult I was like, oh wow, when I was really like learning about like or developing my movement building organizing skills in Washington D.C. and my mentors now became like past civil rights movements leaders and Salvadoran, of communities that just like, were like militant. And like, I learned so much about the reasons why my family had to force migration to the US, which they never talked about because it's so painful. Right. So because of that, so I just like share a little bit of that because that's what really drew me into social justice. Like, I really felt like I had to go into become a social justice activist almost by force because it was a way for me to heal and a way for me to reclaim, right, my own mastery, my efficacy, and like look and create dance pieces around various social justice issues and look at my the creative process as a way to like start unveiling pieces of my history and my privilege and my bicultural identity, and also because I am a mestiza, which is and I say that, and I hate labels, but like I guess that's how people see me is a combination of like European ancestry and also Mayan indigenous ancestry, but I don't know enough about either one of them, to be honest. And through dance, I've been able to explore, particularly like Mayan indigenous creation stories and connection to land, and also like look at like people like me hurt Mayan indigenous people that look like me, like and that's been really painful, right? Or the way people have perceived the fact that I even have a US passport, like from my own community, have been, oh yeah, you're the la fortuna, you're the fortunate one, and it's like, dang, like I just happen to be born in this freaking country that like fucked up so many countries, and did horrible things in the country in Guatemala and throughout the world, and they continue to, and Canada does too. But I was just like, in all that, I just felt that burden on myself. So I just was like, I had to fight back, and like and really explore what that was, and explore guilt and shame, because I actually felt really guilty and shameful for being born in the United States. And so through all of that, I started creating these pieces, or like would go to protests, and one of the things I'd offer would be a small dance piece or a vignette or something, to be in solidarity, and to show like oppression is done on the body, oppression on marginalized groups, from developed countries, or colonizers are always seeing that like there's actually something wrong with the way you look, smell, everything, right? And so to see someone who's like short, because like I was told, I took some ballet, my dance teacher told me that to basically forget it, because you'll never become a ballet dancer, right? I'm like, good, I don't care, like whatever, but someone who's short, who's not super thin, who's like, a bit wider, who, can still, could still move and dance and create, like, and move people, right? And then what I loved was like my peers, or, young women that would look like me, or could, really resonate with me, or just like, I can do that too, right? And so I think those are kind of like my fundamental kind of pillars for why I went into social justice, which it was, my heartbreak, and then, I'm healing by creating pieces and being in solidarity with various movements.
I think you and I have also talked about the fact that growing up in a marginalized community, when it comes to the concept of shame, vulnerability, um, I, I, s- Erica and I studied in the same university, and we would cross path in different spaces of social justice conversations. My ways of knowing about social justice had been pretty deeply colonial and masculine. Um, I tried to hide my insecurity with articulation using academic languages. This is my ways of performing masculinity. So, things that I have learned from Erica, one of the most powerful things, and I will never forget, and I often shared this. I often shared this with myself. And when I see this, and I often share this with myself, is trying to understand that when I'm feeling exhausted, when I'm feeling tired, battered, and broken and bruised. Um, Erica taught me that, you have a heart, take care of it. So I think when it comes to feeling vulnerable, exploring our history, your work, that when you are working with, would you please also share that how your work was connected to migrant workers in Canada? And I remember, I was invited to your house. I would let you share that story, please. Mm.
I gotta admit, I'm a little tender about it, just even when you said it. Yeah, I think, man, Feroz.
I learned that courage from you, Erica.
It's just that I'll tell the migrant farm workers from Mexico and Guatemala are very, very dear to my heart. And I'm so grateful that I was able to share the gift of dance. And I was able to share or co-create a dance piece with a beautiful, beautiful man named Juan Luis Mendoza de la Cruz, who was 50 years old, and who was living, like about 8 to 10 months away from his family for 30 years. And we met again when he was 50. And then I did a couple of just like therapeutic dance for relaxation classes at this Anglican church where I met him. And he was like, what do you mean that we can like heal our bodies and heal without using words, right? And I was using a lot of dance movement, kind of therapeutic methods and approaches. I'm not a therapist, but I've been a student for many, many years. And so he was like, very curious about who I was. And then I asked if I could go visit like his farm, and he works in the flower industry. And there's, when I went, there was like acres upon acres of sunflowers, right? And I was like, do you know, like, this is a masterpiece. Like, all of you are artists, right? And he was so touched by the fact that I called them artist. He's like, no one has ever called me an artist. And so I was like, but you are you kidding me? Like, look at this thing. Like, this is amazing. So they were like little baby sunflowers all to which like these ginormous, ginormous sunflowers. And we started exploring the sunflowers and the relationship of sunflowers to the elements, to the wind, the sun, the water, or the rains, the earth. And we were just playing at first, and I was using approaches that I've learned from amazing indigenous choreographers called land dancing or ecological land dance practices. And we ended up creating a 15-minute dance piece about his life and his relationship to the sunflowers and the elements. And it was beautiful. And we ended up like having, we took it, like it became on tour. There's like a small documentary about it called The Sunflower Man. We just got a lot of attention because, first of all, many people have never met a migrant farm worker because they're, invisible, structurally invisible because they're on the farm in mostly white rural communities. And they live on the farm or in close proximity to the farms. And, it's one of the most oppressive systems that I have ever witnessed in my life. And
in Canada, and we have a very, very sanitized understanding of Canada, which
right.
I absolutely hate.
In Canada. So and I'd say in the United States too, but yes, in Canada, because everyone thinks Canada is so humanitarian and all this craziness. No, I would say, please look into the history of residential school systems and so on and so forth. But migrant farm workers generally feel or are made to feel powerless, and this effect on this powerlessness upon the human psyche and its development are profound, right? It was this, he wanted to leave a legacy. He wanted to find a way to not be invisible anymore. And he wanted to plant a seed in order to shift the system and make it better for the new ones that are coming on. So anywho, we created this beautiful dance piece, and we toured it around for a bit. And unfortunately, he died May 19th of this year because of COVID. And I spoke to him a couple of days before he went into the hospital, and then that was it. And so, yeah, it's been quite a wave, like various waves of griefs. But one of the things I got to say about Juan Luis Mendoza de la Cruz is that you talk about vulnerability and strength and vulnerability. He was able to, literally show like Canadians, like his hands, his body, like his face, his facial expressions. He took the courage to speak in English, even though he felt very uncomfortable speaking in English. He shared a poem. He planted these seeds, the sunflower seeds at the end of the dance piece. He goes and he plants the sunflower seeds, what we call the sunflower seeds of justice, into everyone's hand. And he said a prayer for them so they could help to shift, their thinking. And we took this all the way to Parliament Hill. Like, that's how, we had no idea that this was going to happen. Right. So all these kind of opportunities came up. But the fact that he was willing to give his body and show people like that we're real, stop dehumanizing us. Right. And we have families, we're actually really smart. They're farmers. Right. So I in terms of social justice, that was a piece that I've written about, and that that he just told the story using his body. And I have, maybe later on, if it's okay, I can show some pictures.
Absolutely. And I think Erica and I also have shared spaces where we have talked a lot about decolonizing our mind, decolonizing our emotions, decolonizing our life. Um, what just Erica at the moment shared is that how, I mean, I have not felt comfortable being vulnerable until my mid 30s. I have always felt that I cannot feel my emotions. So this is fundamentally psychic colonization, because the whole foundation of colonization was that, oh, the Europeans are rational, logical, they don't feel emotion, hence they are the master of the world. But you, my friends, you use performing art and take the emotion from it. What is it? I was thinking when Erica was sharing the story that the famous Serbian artist Marijama Abramovic, is she's from Serbia, right? I think so. I think so. So she sat down and she just looked in the eyes of people with compassionate presence. Without understanding, people started weeping, sobbing like a child, because they have disconnected their inner human, inner child for so long. But to be able to look somebody in the eye is an incredibly courageous and kind act, which I don't think the academic colonial training actually teaches. Um, Sriti, I'm sure that this. You understand that both we are taking the courage to be vulnerable. So you also have used dance, particularly Chondalika, the to explore social justice issues, understanding our subjectivity in New York. Could you tell us, the story and your learning from that?
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to address something that Erica had mentioned, because I feel like she explained a lot of very, very important pieces and milestones, as throughout her narration. And one of the things that was coming to mind was that, you know, I think it's so important. Like it may not, it may slip through people's fingers when they're like trying to grasp this concept, but the fact that when you appreciate someone's work, and something like, referring to the migrants' work or the migrant workers' work as art, right? Giving it the value that it deserves, the appreciation and acknowledgement that it deserves, that means the world. Because who are we without people who do a variety of different tasks and work and jobs and so on, right? And I feel like within the Bangladeshi American community, something that they've brought with them from Bangladesh and have continued to perpetuate here is this lack of appreciation for all different kinds of work and all different kinds of art, right? Art within work, not necessarily just art as we define art to be. And I thought that was such an incredible point that she made, to the degree where they were able to take this to a much greater platform in order to perpetuate a social change. So something like Jandalika, like that you asked about, it's Rabindranath Tagore's dance drama. He had already composed, written it, and people have basically performed it afterwards, right? Like we are now. I'm in my mid-20s, so I'm still in the process of learning about a lot of things and just conceptualizing it. And as I'm listening to you guys speak, I'm over here like, how can I like relate this back to where I live and the people around me? And that's just like my process right now. So Chandalika, I'll mention, was my first launching dance theater act. And I played the lead role of Chandalika, the daughter of a Chandal. So through the play, or It's a dance drama. So we dance and we go through a theatrical performance. There is no dialogue. That's already pre-recorded. That's just how it kind of is. And these are very popular in Southern Asia. And we brought this to the theatrical stage in New York. And the ones that we did actually became very, very popular. Chandalika was showcased 5 times, which is a huge deal for us as a Bangladeshi community here. So what happened is, the actual storyline goes as such, very briefly. Chandalika is the daughter of an untouchable woman. She's of the lowest caste, right? And this girl, she's like perhaps around puberty, like she's hitting puberty, like she's an adolescent, and she's coming into confrontation with a lot of backlash from society. Society doesn't believe that she deserves to live like a decent human being. People do not interact with her. They don't want her to touch things. They don't want her to associate with them. She's treated very poorly. Now, the story goes that as she is doing her daily tasks, she complains to her mom. Her mom doesn't do anything about it because her mom has now already become assimilated and is accepting of this society and this toxicity, which we can relate back to our communities, specifically the Bangladeshi communities, where people are very comfortable with shoving very, high emotional or high stakes conversations under the rug because it's just too much for them. And culturally, it's not encouraged to have very difficult conversations that are emotional. It's just not. So her mom does exactly that. And she's like, no, it's okay. You'll be fine. Go do your work. Right. And and the girl, she is doing her work and a monk crosses paths with her and asks for some water. She of course declines, says, hey, I'm an untouchable, can't touch your water. And he's like, no, you're human, I'm thirsty, come on, let's make this work. And she's like, okay. After that, she becomes like super obsessed with this man, asks her mom to bring him to her and so on, right? Now, that's how the story is normally told. It's actually, because of all the theatrical stage lighting and sound and beautiful music, you never realize how simply it's told and how lack of analytical information that showcases. So when I perform Chandalika as Chandalika, I changed that in my own way through my performance. And instead of performing it such that I was obsessed with this monk, I performed it such that I was obsessed with the idea of being treated like a decent human being. Like, I don't care about this man, whether this was a man or a woman or a child who treated me with decency. It would still be a new experience, right? It would still be a very big experience for someone who's considered to be the lowest of a caste. And of course, in America, the people who are considered lower class, they are treated poorly. It's not like this just exists in Bangladesh and India. That is a false understanding. Like, oh, you leave India or you leave Bangladesh or you leave the South Asian country and you come to the Americas. Feroz says this all the time about Canada. The people's false belief about entering a country of a land made of milk and honey. Yeah, no, right? You're bringing it with you. It's a part of your tradition. So when it comes to this, right, understanding of this dance drama, I changed that up. And I think a lot of people resonated with it. I was very angry during the performance. It showed. I was very pissed off. I showed that. I did not agree with what people were saying. I showed that too. And frankly, I'm an adolescent. I'm allowed to have a crush on a man if I think he's treating me well, especially when I'm in a toxic environment. It could be psychologically that I get attached to the one person who ever shows me some sort of respect and decency. It could happen. I'm not saying it's right, but it could happen. Showcase that too. So not exactly the most, what would you call it, quintessential showcasing of a story, but I feel like people needed to see that. And by the end of it, I think a lot of people appreciated it. People were crying. So I think it had some sort of an impact. And we were asked to then reperform this for like people who are working for the UN, Mission, Bangladesh Consulate, so on. So all these big folks. But I think the most impactful performance was the one that we did for free, which was the first initial launch. And we did that in the Bronx in a local venue. And there were thousands of people there and they felt it. So as important as it is to take these things, I want to take them to a greater platform so that people can actually project it and market it. And I guess like, what would you call it? Like make sure that and like spread it around. What's the word?
Promote it, probably.
Promote it, yeah, so that people can promote it and these changes can, you know, happen on a larger scale, but it starts locally. And that's one thing that I appreciate about your story as well, right? You work with the locals, you work on a ground level, you work at the grassroots level, and that's what creates this change. And these people go out to 10 more people and talk about this change. So
Yeah.
I hope that
Yeah.
answers the question.
Yeah, but also I want to go back to you for one quick more minute. What right now Sriti said is incredibly gutsy. She said that she has adapted Chandalika. Chandalika is written by only Bengali Nobel laureate poet who is considered to be, and which I absolutely love about Sriti. She's unapologetic about her position is the fact that she has grown up in Newark. She has the right to relate to the work the way it means to her. Who the hell am I to show my so-called Bengali class onto her, saying that, oh, this is not how. So when she said that, obviously Rabindranath Tagore was a man, and the conversation, so it's about caste system and the young woman's obsession with the man, and so on and so forth. But then uh, Sriti has repurposed it, trying to understand the social realities of New York in 2021, 2020, 2019, not almost 100 years ago. So, and I think that's incredibly important. And what Sriti just mentioned too is that we in Bangladeshi community, being a British colony for 200 years, our internalized racism, our internalized hierarchical structure, we are sometimes pretty cruel, dare I say, towards our own people. This is not going to be popular. And the whole point is, I don't think that we are having this conversation to be popular. We're having this conversation to be able to speak things courageously so that we stop hiding. We stop. So one of the things that, Heryka, you have lived a long time in America. Now you live in Canada. You have seen both of them hands just intimately. Your understanding is not theoretical. I've been living in Canada for past 8 years only. So when I say to people back in Bangladesh, and I'm telling you that because of our economic, political, a lot of situations, we want to come to Canada. That's fine. But I said that don't come here with the romantic perception about Canada that Justin Trudeau is going to stand at the airport, spreading red carpet for you. That's for a photo op when Syrian refugee came. But go and understand what is the reality of Syrian refugees here. It's a whole different game. So Heryka works with community. Understanding is very different. We use the fancy word ontological understanding, experiential understanding. Go there and see what it is. We Bengalis don't say what's happening in Newark. We project, and again, it's an internalized inferiority. Oh, life here is beautiful. It's a land of milk and honey. No, 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 no. We got to disrupt it. Say it for what it is. I mean, so this is incredibly important. Heryka, you have mentioned, you are saying is that dance, and I agree with you 100%, but I want this to also be available to our students in Bangladesh and anybody around the world, is dance is an embodied ways of knowing. Could you speak to that, please?
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking about like the courage, Margia, that it took for you to shift the narrative. Like, woof, like that's that's awesome. That's very gutsy. So very proud of you. That's awesome. Yeah, embodiment, right? Like embodiment is like, it's our skin, right? It's these textures. It's this emotional history that we carry inside. It's this It's the stories. I've had a couple of injuries, and I'm not in my 20s. I'm in my mid 40s now, and the body has been like not even whispering anymore. It's been yelling at me, right? And so it, because I also, I've neglected it. And I've pushed it, right, and I've forced some things, and so now I'm paying attention in a very, very profound way. But in terms of embodiment, that is like, it is the container of our entire life experience, is this incredible body, right? And it's centered in movement, so it's centered in our breath, like even when we're not, conscious, like, and the breath is so profound for me. I've been, just studying and learning more about breath in terms of embodiment, and like this incredible resource that we already have innately to honor reciprocity, right? So like when we inhale the beautiful oxygen that we get from the trees and the plants, and then when we exhale, we provide carbon dioxide. So there's always these give and take, and we forget about that, but we're also not encouraged to like know that we have these tools inside of us, right? We're built to be reciprocal, peaceful human beings, believe it or not. So are the expression of our biology, our personality, our soul, our spirit is all in this container of what we call the physical body, right? And it's so dimensional, right, in terms of spirituality, and that's some of the things that I'm so grateful for in terms of my work with Indigenous choreographers, where it is about like, yes, showing that vulnerability. There's so much courage and strength and wisdom in sharing that and sharing those stories, right? Or like, I was so ashamed to be like, I don't want to say that I'm inadequate or whatever, that I felt inadequate or whatever. Because then like people are gonna think I'm stupid, or but it's like I was pushed to really get at the root of where that comes from, and then looking at oppression, right, and like and colonization, and the legacies of that, and how that has impacted us like generation to generation to generation, right? But yeah, it's an embodiment is part of that, right? Like we hurt, like, so what, how amazing would it be for us to explore that hurt, like wherever that is, wherever that tension is. And it's not, you don't have to make this elaborate like dance piece. It's just, I remember doing it in my bedroom when I was a little girl, and I still do it now. Like the dances that I do now are just for me. And I write about it. And then it's just a way to really explore the postures, the gestures, like the use of space, the movements, large and small, and what they mean in that particular moment. And that, we have the power and the capacity to do that with this living, breathing body, and that also includes people who are not mobile, right? I worked for quite some time with people with disabilities, or physical disabilities, or developmental disabilities, and they were my greatest teachers, right? So like when I broke something, like I broke a bone for the first time in my life in January 1st, and I was like, and I had to teach dance, and I was like, oh man, how am I going to do that? And then I was like, you can do this, like. So I had to explore that, and I had to really adapt, and it made some of the students like, oh yeah, if she can do it, like I know I can do it. I'm like, everyone needs to get up right now, okay? And I think even people, or accompanying people who don't use words, right? I accompanied someone for 7 years who doesn't use words to speak, but use gestures and facial expressions, and so that was like the most incredible experience for me, was accompanying this incredible woman and learning through embodiment, like her way of being, right? She's dependent on everyone, on other people, for her to live, right? For her to be fed, to be refreshed, and all of these things. So it really expanded my sense of embodiment and accompanying, somebody's, to embody the world, to co-create their poems and their dances, right? because they too can dance. And anyway, that's a little bit of what I can share, but in terms of that question.
And I think, and I will ask this question to Shiriti. What do you think is that how in our culture, what Heryka was mentioning is that our body is this amazingly intelligent and spiritual container to understand our relation with the world in a reciprocal way, is that we are always existing relationally. But then when we are here, I mean, how in Heryka beautifully shows it, is that we think that we're understanding the world rationally, logically, by disconnecting and carrying often a misperceived notion about the world, that I am here apart from the nature, therefore I am to rule everybody. And that's when it comes to relation. I mean, a lot of the times, why do you see historically there is obsession in men to control and possess women's body, whether it is war and whether it is genocide and what have you. Question: do you think in Bangladeshi culture, you have been to Bangladesh not many times, but do you see there is a huge stigma that when girls, they hit their puberty, oh, no, you cannot dance, you cannot explore your body, this disjointing yourself from your own existence? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think Heryka mentioned a couple of really important points that I kind of want to speak to as well, but definitely while answering your question. So yes, it is, our existence is reciprocal, right? We're an accumulation of everything that we've experienced from day one, before that, right? From the womb, because that's what anatomically is shifting us, molding us. And then since date of conception to date of death, we are a constant, we're a journal, we're a record, right? Of a lot of information. So I think it would be ignorant of me to say that we can differentiate, right? We can choose to not acknowledge. That's one thing, right? We can be like, yeah, we're just intellectual beings, so on. And we can say that, but it doesn't make it true, right? There's a lot of academics who may behave that way as well. I've come to understand. So I used to be in research as well, Heryka. For a bit. So I used to work in Albert Einstein College of Medicine, straight out of, I was in a lab while I was in college. And then after that, it was like my first full-time job. And I worked my way up and then decided, I was like, I think therapy is going to be my thing. So I left research. I was like, you know what? I think my people are going to be able to benefit more from therapy. Because there's a massive disconnect within the Bangladeshi population. Not all South Asia. I don't want to speak for all of South Asia. Just based on the research that I've been involved in, I can say that there is a disconnect between understanding what anatomically is existing and what mentally is existing, and then outputting, right? And I think it's easier to speak that way, because then when someone is reacting to something, or when someone is, trying to rationalize something, it's easier to say, oh yeah, it's because of your emotion, not because of your intellectual capacity. It's easier to oppress when you differentiate, as opposed to understanding that you are doing the exact same thing, and it is all a product of of both mind and body coming together, and whatever it is you choose to do. It's not just the mind rationalizing, it's your body as well. Now, with regards to gestures you had mentioned, so within South Asian classical dance, gestures is a very important part. When I teach, I also use gestures. We teach different techniques, but first, gestures are the first thing. So the first 28 single-handed gestures is what we teach the kids. It becomes their basic alphabet. So I don't know, I'll just pataka, tripataka, ardhapataka, kartari, mukha, right? These like little different gestures, every single classical dancer watching this video will know, because it's their day one lesson, it's their ABCs. And they internalize it. The kids do it all the time. They internalize it. They learn this different language. So when you learn a different language, you are stimulating a certain part of your brain. You are learning something new. You are learning a different mode of communication. And dance provides exactly that. Specifically dance that has, I mean, I don't want to make classical dance, like, I don't want to turn it into something elite, although it is fantastic. But there's a systematized grammatical form to whether you're doing folk or classical or whatever. When you're teaching a certain art form, there's a grammatical foundation that you teach first, right? Or else the kid won't get it, right? And that foundation provides them with a resource pool of information that they can use to communicate with other people with on a day-to-day basis. And I think that is very important, to be able to diversify the way you communicate, because then it doesn't become linear anymore. Like you were saying before, you're not a linear person. And I have a feeling that a lot of it has to do with the fact that you have so many modes of communication that have been, accumulated over time. What was your question again? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, all of those points are very, very important, and we needed to know that, the point of that we are not being linear, and that no, I don't think anybody's linear. I don't think human beings. I think linearity is used actually to control, to create the hierarchy that, oh, I'm talking to Dr. Shiriti because she has a dissertation done, and so on and so forth. The question is that how in Bangla, I'm going to speak to specifically because both you and I are Bangladeshi and we have very intimate connection to root and culture, is that me being a teacher, I know that how young girls in Bangladesh, and again, I'm connected to education in Bangladesh in rural areas, how their desire to learn dance or their, desire to move with their body is not welcome in many, many spaces, and how it actually separates. There's a famous dance teacher in Toronto. She's doing something that doctors are recording, doctors are researching, is that so she takes patients who the doctors have given up on, like, okay, no, this person is paralyzed, it's not gonna recover, gone, old person. What she is doing, she's using Bangladeshi Indian classical dance to stimulate joy, happiness, and healing them. And this is happening right in Toronto. But then we don't want to teach our girls that. Boys, oh my God. I'm obviously, Heryka, you probably wouldn't know that in Bangladesh, as guys, no, we don't dance. We don't dance. No.
Yeah, it's not a thing anymore. It's like, for sure. Okay, now I remember. I remember what you're saying, and I agree. So when it comes to dance, so we have to also regard the background, right? Within Bangladesh, primarily, it's a Muslim backgrounded country, right? There's a small population of people who practice Hinduism, a small population of Christianity, and a couple of other religions, but majority is of a Muslim sect, right? And for that purpose, this is not research based. From people that I have spoken to who are in the field of dancing and in the cultural arts work, and just people who are older, who've lived pre-war, something that interesting that has come up a couple of times, and I don't know if you can, speak to this, Rose, is that it wasn't always this conservative. I'm gonna get some heat for this, but it wasn't always this conservative. And there was a point in time when girls could go to college and just, engage in different college activities and chill and engage with the opposite sex in a normal capacity. Yes, it was always, because of the culture, a little bit conservative, but there was this normalcy, right? That humans interact. And people and girls and boys both engage in different school activities together. Like, it's a thing, right? How did we go from that when it was pre-war to a time like now where people like my parents, right? They came here in the 90s. They were born in the 70s. How did they end up acquiring this culture where it's much more conservative than what apparently was pre-war, right? Where you cannot even speak to the opposite sex or without there being and I'm not saying this is for everyone, but there is a culture of this that exists, right? I've experienced it. So it exists, right? There's no question about the fact that it doesn't exist. This is not a debate, because some people will try to argue that. And Yeah, so people of my parents' generation have come here, and they've brought with them this kind of conservatism where it's very extreme, in my opinion. And yeah, and I wonder where that came from. And with regards
It,
to sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it has a, sorry, just to quickly add to that, what you said right now, Sriti, I don't want us to forget this. It has a historical root. In 1905, there was the British Viceroy of India. His name was Curzon, Lord Curzon. And actually, it's funny. The biggest university in Bangladesh, Dhaka University, is a hall in his name. It's funny that we in Bangladesh we still have, a couple of days ago in Canada, the people have toppled Queen Victoria's, statues. They have burnt, churches. And from Bangladesh, it might look like, oh, why are they burning churches? Well, if they caused a genocide, terminated only 98% of your people, what would you do? Would I just, have a statue of Lord Clive, or, who has caused genocide? So in Bangladesh, the current conservatism, whether it is this is based on research, by the way, is that in Bangladesh, what happened, that in Bengal, being the richest province of India, and it was a British headquarters, from there they're controlling everything. What happened, the people started getting understanding the oppression, and they started resisting. Bengalis, by the way. Mm-hmm. And then, the classic British and British policy, divide and rule, right? So in 1905, Lord Curzon, what he did, he separated Bengal, the Hindu part and the Muslim part, right? But what we often forget, that when it was separated, now a lot of us in I'm sure in New York it's not different, is that a group of Muslims, Nazrul Islam is our poet because he was a Muslim. Rabindranath Tagore is a poet of the Hindus because he was a Hindu. But what's interesting, that when British wanted to divide Hindu and Muslim in 1905, Rabindranath Tagore actually used a cultural event where the in Indian culture we have a thing that the brothers tie a kind of thing on sisters tie a kind of thing. It's called Rakhi to their brother's hand. So he did it. He said, don't separate. Nazrul Islam has written songs that Mora Aki Brinte Duite Kushum Hindu Musalman, means we are two flowers in the same two buds in the same stem, Hindus and Muslims, right? But the hate that was sowed in 1905 eventually yielded. Eventually now, Muslims and Hindus, we cannot tolerate each other. Now, when it comes to the foreign diaspora and also back in Bangladesh, anywhere in the world, when the economic inequality increases tremendously, we want to hold on to some kind of story, some kind of myth, because what is the coping mechanism? So from Bangladesh, I come from Bangladesh to New York. In Bangladesh, I had family, social network, kind of social recognition. All of a sudden, I'm surviving. I'm working probably in a oppressive situation. Probably I'm working in a bodega. You talked about it in our last conversation, that we don't want to talk about it. So then embracing something gives us some kind of defense mechanism. So you are absolutely right, is that yes, there was a time that Hindus and Muslims and are intermingling, embracing other culture. We are much open. But with the colonial past, hatred sowed in 1905 and fanned and fueled subsequently, and economic inequality, yes, that is becoming harder. Sorry, I thought that was probably needed.
No, that was definitely needed. And I'll just add to that a bit more. So I'll just give an example of like Kathak, right? And actually, I'll just say South Indian classical dance, all right? Or Indian classical dance. It's not all South Indian. Kathak is originating from northern India. The origins are folk. Bharatanatyam is considered to be Southern Indian. Of course, whenever you look into the history of any classical dance, you're going to see a certain amount of change over time of each of these dances, historical changes, and how they took form of what it is today. For example, Kathak, it used to be a folk form, then for going into the temples became temple dancing, then going into the courts, dancing for the Mughal kings and so on, became the courtesans existed, and after the British, of course, a certain amount of skill sets were appealing, and therefore it went onto a theatrical stage. I'm totally minimalizing this history right now for the sake of time, but there's a history, right? And when it comes to something like the wife culture, the wives are, in short, courtesans, right? Very, very talented folk, women who were landowners, and as well as people who, performers. They were performance artists who performed for very high class folk, whether they're kings or people of the, of the kingdom, and their history has been, because you talk about this Hindu-Muslim divide, it exists from its roots, even in India, right? So there, and it's not spoken about. Like Devdasis are spoken about. I understand that they are, of course, went through their own whole channel of oppression and their history being kind of oppressed and reshifted and rewritten, or retold, more so, not rewritten, but retold to be more appealing to the masses. But when it comes to the vibe culture, we don't talk about it when it comes to the classical dance sector. Why? Right? Because we don't want to talk about things like, it's not that we don't want to talk about ghazals. Ghazals are, a type of music, but we don't want to talk about the Muslim contribution. We don't want to talk about the Muslim, I don't want to call it Muslim because it's I don't want to get heat for, saying that this is coming directly from the religion. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a cultural aspect, right? That ensues whenever you're, okay, I'm from a Muslim background. I'm also Bengali. That means something different from me being Muslim and Pakistani, or me being Muslim and Taiwanese. I don't, there's a difference. So at that point in time, for courtesans in the culture that they were coming from, the background that they have come from, many of them were not practicing Hindus, right? Many of them were. All I'm saying is the part of which was of a background of people who were into Sufism, ghazals, responsible for the beautiful shararas and kararas and whatnot, and creating a different kind of presentation of the Kathak classical dance, which is now so renowned and very much so Hinduized, right? There was some contribution there that was not solely Hindu, and it's not talked about. It's not performed solely. Everything is Radha Krishna based. And why is that? It's either that, or it's like, it's just showing off skills. I know there are a lot of people, a lot of Indians who are now bringing that into a stage and telling all sorts of different stories, conceptualizing Kathak differently. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the traditional teaching of classical dance and how Muslims have really been erased from the history and historical context. And I don't think that's right. I think there are people who have studied it, who are studying it, but people don't want to talk about it, because if you do talk about it, then you get ostracized from the greater community, which is Hindu.
That is an Indian context, absolutely. That we see the right-wing Hinduism rise of that, and a systematic sort of drive to marginalize, erase, a huge contribution. And Sriti, thank you for adding that point, that the Sufi spiritual contribution of Islam in creating a rich culture, which goes in completely in a different. But that's not studied. That's not understood. That's a systematic way of erasure. Heryka, you have started our conversation with something very powerful, that dancing was a way of resisting. We know that how in the context of United States, that the Black people, Black communities have used their ways, their cultures, whether it is jazz, whether it is blues, whether it is their ways of dancing at one point, but all of them later got in many ways co-opted for other profit-making ventures. Could you tell us that how do you think there is a connection between dance and spirituality of knowing yourself, and how it has led you to know your root, your culture in a different way? And the same question I would want Sriti to answer after Heryka.
I just feel like I've learned so much, and I'm intrigued to learn more about your dances, and it's such a rich history and the complexities, right, of it all, in the intricacies. So thank you so much, Margia, for that. Okay, sorry, you gotta repeat the question again.
Yeah. So basically, how Um, do you think there is a connection between dance and spirituality, and how it has helped you to know your roots, connect with your culture?
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
was like, wait, I gotta bring it, refocus. Um, yeah, I think like when you first said something about like and how what I said in terms of using dance as a form of resistance, I'm actually learning that it wasn't really resistance, it was really responding, right? And they're two different, because resistance makes it hurt more actually, because you're just like, instead of like, wait, like actually I'm responding, and I'm using the wisdom and the knowledge of the body, right? um so I'm learning that, because I'm trying to, I don't want to resist anymore, because it hurts too much. It really, really hurts to resist. So it's like, how do I just respond and really calm and relax the nervous system, to allow it to feel and flow whatever emotion and feeling needs to come forth, and in whatever shape and form it needs to create. um, I think in terms of spirituality and dance, it's pivotal. I mean, it's, the dance is the way that our spirit speaks, right? It's whatever is transmitted into shape and form. There's spirit there, right? And I find that with music, right? And it it's such an opportunity. There's so much, I'd like to say, medicine, right, in the pieces that are created, and some pieces that are just for oneself, or those that we share, that we choose to share, in front of people. I think one of the things that I loved with working with migrant farm workers. I mean, obviously, Luis was like, we created this 15-minute piece, but I was also working with other migrant farm worker communities, and each time they would share, it was always something very spiritual, or like that there was something that, in the shapes that they were creating in relationship to the plants that they were, that they've spent so much time with, caretaking. They realized, like, again, that relationship and reciprocity and that spirit of the plant, right, and themselves. And then there was always these beautiful moments of like philosophical conversations about spirit. So I learned so much uh, with just with accompanying and guiding, and that there's no right or wrong way to move. Like, we have such an incredible opportunity, right? To like, I think as educators, and I came as an educator, like, again, by fluke. I was invited to teach a course. I was like, what? You really want me in the classroom? And then I was just like, oh, you know what? No, you actually need me in this classroom, because we need to, like, no, 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 no. Like, actually put all your books down. Teachers, get up. Like, please don't do this to your children, right? To your students, right? Like, you see, like, what is it that they have to share? That for me, it is spirit, and it's wisdom and knowledge. That if we're given the opportunity to share and explore and experiment, like, there's so much wisdom and medicine there. And in general, like, the medium of dance, like from ancient times, has been used to cope with difficult emotions, such as grief and anger and anxieties, and to nourish the individual to with this sense of belonging, and like to create this channel of communication that touches on a person's deepest spiritual sentiment. And it's this relationship with the gods, the cosmos. Like, it's so much, right? Like, there's so much there, in terms of spirit. I think now my dances, which I'm not a performer anymore, but when I do dance, it's an offering now to mostly the land, and it's like a friend's, wedding or what have you, or if someone is sick, I have been asked um to do dances, like blessing dance blessings, and that's what I do. And maybe I'll video it and share it, or not, and it will just be in a private space, and they trust and know that that is what I'm offering. for them or for that person. So yeah, anyway, that's what I can share about spirit and dance.
I just wanted to quickly share some beautiful observations and comments that Dilara has mentioned something. The dear Miranda, I can literally relate to you. I work for NGO and we use theater for development as a tool, and it is massively powerful. Um, your story gave me goosebumps and brought tears. You're amazing. Um, I mean, the thing is, when we teach now, a lot of the times, because if the heart is not moved, I don't think you can bring a change. I mean, when you were mentioning about resisting and responding, so if you look into Buddhist philosophy, there is a state of our mind which in language is called bodhisattva, means that your spirit is awakened to be able to respond. The idea of responsibility comes from compassion. Compassion is very different from other emotions. Is that you look at a tree in front of your house, which is dying because it needs water. You watered the tree. That's responding. So bodhisattva is a state of our mind where we are able to understand feelings of all forms of life around us and respond to it. So responsibility is the ability to respond to life. So it's a very different way. So when you were saying, I was like, oh, wow. I wonder if, you're exactly saying, and also one of the things about Buddhist philosophy or the Eastern philosophy or Vedic philosophy is that one of the fundamental problematic aspect of Christianity and coloniality is understanding the world, in a binary, good and evil. You are a sinner, therefore I need to cure you. Imagine the amount of self-hatred we inflict in us in the civilizing mission. Oh, I have gone to this part of the world. You're not educated. You're not civilized. I am here to civilize you. So tell me, do you think the burning of church in Canada does not have a history? How would you feel that if an institution like that murdered your ancestors and we don't even talk about intergenerational trauma that we are carrying in us. So I'm sure that Sriti knows a lot more about it than I could possibly even scratch on the surface. Sriti, please.
I'm not going to go too into intergenerational drama, just that it exists. So very much so. There's so much communication gap, so much intergenerational trauma, so much negativity that is perpetuated throughout the generations due to the experiences of our forefathers that were never properly processed and talked about. Right? Because that's not a thing in our culture. We don't process emotions. We just, we just live on with it. So aside from that, something that I wanted to kind of that was I was noting while you guys were talking. So within a country like Bangladesh, right? And now, of course, the dance scene has definitely erupted a bit more. Social media, kids are more into it. People are more in tune. Not that the country doesn't have its issues, but I think that's pretty cool that it's starting to look normal in terms of kids or adolescents or people my age being more involved in the arts, right? Recently, there was a lot of news about a couple of women who have made headlines, right? Like I think Badhon, she had made a headline due to this amazing film that was released, making it to the Canes. There was another woman who was of Bangladeshi descent who was responsible for like this antiviral, antibacterial spray that was used during COVID. Another woman who was like a master chef and has made her name among some of the tops of the world. These are amazing things. And there's some amazing people who are coming out of Bangladesh, right? I can't help but wonder whether the way that the Bangladeshi community talks about such people, I definitely think they should definitely be noted and they should, be celebrated 100%. But something that I noticed that the Bangladeshi community does, I don't know about in Bangladesh, but they do it here, is they tokenize. So they'll find like that poster child who has done well despite the conditions, and they'll highlight that person and be like, wow, look, the product of our culture, whether or not that's true, right? And I feel I've seen that a lot. I've seen it in a racial context. I'll just give an example. For example, in an academic setting where there's that one Black person on the committee, and they're literally there in order to add diversity, and it's not necessarily of course that person might be intelligent, but really the reason why that person was asked to join the committee was that they can have a person of color, so that the committee overall, or the people who are actually in charge, don't get crap for it, right? So this sort of tokenism I do see within the Bangladeshi culture used, a lot. I don't know how healthy that is, right? So just putting that out there. These people totally deserve the recognition that they're getting. I'm talking about the culture itself that it's perpetuating, right? And something that I wanted to bring up was you had mentioned before about girls dancing and, how they are not supposed to after a certain age, so on. That's true. I know that Heryka was mentioning something about her body, things about her body, and it's not, the way that you necessarily want it to work now is perhaps not, it's not working to that degree anymore. Within the culture of Bangladeshi dancers, yoga, body warm-ups, things like that to take care of oneself, self-care is not really a thing, right? And that's something I grew up experiencing as well. You're not encouraged to do warm-ups. You're not encouraged to take care of yourself in other ways, like do yoga or meditate or, drink and eat well.
Especially for women, though.
Yeah, you're not. People don't even talk about periods. Like, what are you supposed to do as a dancer when you have a performance? How do you handle that? We don't talk about things like that, right? And these are very, it's taboo as is. So is dance. Now, I want to bring up something that's spiritual, religious. So, since the country, the population is primarily Muslim, and now it's pushing more and more in a conservative direction. Nothing wrong with being Muslim, nothing wrong with following it and practicing it in a wholesome way. But there's an anti-art attitude amongst many people. So as a dancer, as a female dancer, you're committing a sin. It's very difficult for you to then go back home and pray 5 times a day and claim yourself to be a practicing Muslim and claim that your spirituality comes from that. If you do, you're considered like a hypocrite, right? There's a lot of hate if you were to merge the two. You just can't, you don't, right? So what I'm thinking is all these people who do want to dance, all these women who do want to dance and be free and welcome their bodies, but then you have this religion that's perpetuated that tells you that you shouldn't or you can't, right? Okay, that's fine. But then the people themselves are also approaching you in a very hateful way. It's not like, the attitude is not that, oh yeah, she's from a Muslim background and she wants to dance, just let her do what she wants to do. She's doing good stuff, whatever. It's not casual, it's not chill. The attitude is not that. That doesn't exist. So publicly, there isn't a mesh, right? So I do want, and on top of that, I just mentioned, things like yoga, meditation, self-care is also not encouraged. So how do these people, like I've heard this, I think it was Iman Chakrabarti, I want to say it's her name. She's this really popular singer. She put it on her Facebook a description of herself. She said, music is my religion, something like that, right? And I'm like, well, I can see that. I can see how a lot of dancers might be like, yeah, just dance is my religion. I don't even know what to relate to at this point. The religion I grew up in, I can't go to, I'm rejected by that. The culture I'm in, they're very conservative and they don't accept me. I'm not considered to be one of polite society. And on top of that, there's no other spiritual outlet for me to actually, immerse myself in for the norm, right? There are people like, okay, I live in America, I'm privileged. I can go to yoga classes, I can do meditation and whatever. This is not the case for most people, right? So what are their states of mind? What do they do to actually live wholesomely, right? Because there's always going to be a part of them that's like, I don't belong, I can't relate, I don't know. And that sucks, right? And another thing about dance that I've seen happen within the Bangladeshi community, it's very severely politicized, right? Not that I think there's anything wrong with doing patriotic dance items, right? I do it myself. So there's some Bangladeshis, there's a lot of beautiful places and things, and in Bangladesh that you can sing and dance about. Folk is derived from nature, so and spirituality, we use that all the time. But nowadays, it's within the dance realm, there's a pressure. If you are to be a dancer of polite society, there's a pressure to also dance and create items that are agreeable with the current government. I'm not going to go further into that because it's going to become problematic. But that does exist. And I just want to point that out. Now, someone like Akram Khan, who's also a Bangladeshi dancer, has done well for himself, lives in London, so on, right? And has this big dance company. He has moved. He didn't do it in Bangladesh. He did it elsewhere, right? And same thing happened to him with the tokenism. Now Bangladeshis want to take all the credit for this guy's success, right? But and he did come back to Bangladesh and do this incredible project with a lot of Bangladeshi dancers and so on. But what I want to say is he's created projects that are not just political, and he's created creative projects. And I wish to see more of that within the Bangladeshi dance realm, as opposed to us dancing only when it's 21 February and 16 December and 26 March for your, patriotic days.
I think it would be, and I, like Sriti has mentioned it a couple of times, that she's going to get a lot of heat for it, and I'm going to get a lot of heat for that, but I'm going to go with it anyway, because sometimes we just need to be courageous. We just can't help but being courageous. One of the things about the cultural scene in Bangladesh is the unmistakable elitism. Who has the right to dance? Who has the right to perform? When Sriti was talking about that tokenism, when you are saying that in Bangladesh right now, probably you can see a lot of people who are dancing, performing, I think that the visibility has become possible because of the technological changes. But if you look at the number of people, I can tell you that I'll give you one very specific segment, that in Bangladesh there are different kinds of education. So the most privileged, wealthy kids, they go to school that the syllabus and curriculum comes from Britain, Cambridge University, right? The system that I have taught for a long time. So if you go to one of those schools where you understand, oh, if my daughter dances, if my daughter learns this and that, then this is a cultural capital. So, oh, my daughter knows how to perform Kathak. My daughter knows how to perform, classical dance. That's a cultural capital. But the word that Sriti said, that tawayef, believe me, it is not always used in positive connotation. If you go into the history, if you understand the sexism, misogyny, cultural erasure, and history of it, you will get, and obviously we only say what we can say. We don't always say things. My last question to both of you is that dancing is not easy. It is a very powerful way to get to know yourself, go to your spirituality. And this is like, if you go into Sufi dance, Sufis, mystics, Islamic mystics, they've used dance as a spiritual tool to know ways of knowing in them. At a time when the world is going through a pandemic, and one sociologist from New York University said that we are talking about economic recession, but we are not talking about social recession. Humans are wired to be in company with people. Loneliness is a global public health crisis. Dance can heal a lot. Dance can help us understand a lot of things which you'll probably not understand by reading dry, disjointed, decontextualized, abstract text. So that's me saying this as an educator. That's me who spends his days and nights reading those dry texts. I want you to reflect on it. And what would you say to young, aspiring dance educators, dance artists, And most importantly, your conversations are going to be watched by young students in Bangladesh and around the in pretty much in many marginalized communities. Is that what would be your message to those dance educators and young people to think about dance? Erica, if you would like to go first.
I'm still awake. We're gonna. I think in terms of educators, like dance, and really all the arts, because it's but dance is so unique in that you use your body too with visual arts and music, but like you really you use like this is your tool, right, of creation, right? So I think it really offers students unique opportunities to engage in imaginative and innovative thought and action, and to develop the ability to communicate and in various ways, right, in a myriad of ways, and that really represent thoughts, feelings, and ideas. It also encourages students to take risks, to solve problems in creative ways, and to draw on their resourcefulness to build on new ideas. Um, and I think more than anything, it really helps students experience this sense of wonder and joy, right? And when engaged in dance, and they're so connected to play and human interaction and human and relationship building, right? So I think like in terms of educators, like that's what I can share with them. And in terms of upcoming dancers, and even if you don't think you're a dancer, like that's also like it's an opportunity to heal from those um, colonized thoughts of like not being enough and inadequate. Like I'm a teacher now because and I've had quite a journey. Again, I'm in my mid 40s, um, and I never thought I would be a teacher, right? But I am because of my passion, and I didn't give up. Like I went back to I after my BA, I was never going to set foot in academia again. It wasn't until I turned 40, and it wasn't because of my passion of dance and social justice that I decided to go back. Um, and so and now that I'm an educator now, I'm just like, wow, I never really thought I was going to be in this situation, but I am. And I share where I come from sometimes, and I share this to young people, is that um, take space, and that dance doesn't need to be, you don't have to have years and years of dance classes. I never did. I didn't, my peak, or whatever you want to call it, I don't even know, happened when I was 33 years old, right? And so, there, in terms of time or whatever, like you have all the time in the world. And I say it's not just in a dance studio, it's also like occupying spaces and in outside, and also and being responsible, right? Because the all of the land, right, has been harmed, and and it's an opportunity to also educate yourself on like the history of that particular land, or that if you're doing site specific work, like what is it before you maybe I shouldn't even use the word occupy, right? But you, before you go, it's just like, how do you ask permission, you know and that I just encourage folks to also just explore the incredible memories that are stored within the body, and no one can ever take that right away from you.
I mean, you have said it so beautifully that you are a history. I mean, this is also very, very integral to yoga philosophies. That imagine that your eyes and your nose, your hair, I mean, your ancestors have passed on incredibly important information, in your body.
Sure.
So to be able to explore and go and find that out, right? Mardia.
I just want to say that I find Erica's everything that she says to be so beautifully said, and It's very positive, and unfortunately, a lot of the things that I have said, in this conversation, I cannot be positive because positivity does not change this population that I have to work with, unfortunately, right? Because in our community, nationalism is equated to love of the country and the art and whatever, because everything that's all intertwined. So if you are to make any sort of criticism, or you are to make any sort of suggestion for innovation or change, or, hey, this is not going so well, you have someone who has nothing better to do who will come and be like, oh, so what are you doing? That's why are you going against the country? Bangladesh is so beautiful and so great. And it's like, okay, it is. I'm sure it is. I'm sure, but you're entitled to your opinion. But it's okay to want innovation. It's okay to want to change. It's okay to talk about these things that can make you better. Because if you hold on to this false conception that everything is perfect, then it's going to remain perfect for those people who are doing really well right now, right? Which is not most people. So instead of holding on to this like grandiose, narcissistic sense of nationalism, if you are nationalistic, you are patriotic, then what do you want to do? You want to improve this current state of affairs, right? And perhaps this is a little bit out of my line to say, actually, no, it's not. It's not, right? Out of my line to say. These are things that I've studied for years and years, and I've been a part of it for several years. Most of my life, I've worked in this community. So I think I'm not so ignorant to make, statements or commentary that is completely false or flawed, right? And it's okay to make those commentary because it brings it to people's attention. From where I am, I'm in New York, I'm in America, I grew up here. It's already enough in my opinion, that I'm even involved in this culture because I don't have to be. And frankly, if the younger generation doesn't continue being involved in the traditional culture, at some point it's going to change. Of course, it's changing right now, and it's going to die out, right? And is that what you want, right? So if we're here making the statement that, hey, there are things that could be changed for the better, and we can hold on to our traditions in a better, positive way by making these changes, instead of being hostile, and instead of being ignorant or stubborn about having this conversation or hearing us out, if you just decide to cut communications or attack us, then eventually you're going to be gone, right? And with you, so will your history, right? And frankly, we're going to live on. So will our kids, and we'll be fine with that. So what do you want really? Is the ego more important to you than carrying on something beautiful and spiritual and amazing and positive and healthy? Like, is that really what's more important? So that's kind of what I want to put out there. And with regards to innovating new arts and dances and different kind of ways of presenting theater, it was very difficult for us to create that kind of audience in New York. They didn't exist. That was our mission, to create a kind of a space and change people's mindsets from being just survival to, okay, now I'm open to the arts, I'm open to healing, I'm open to being a part of something bigger and better, right? That's going to enhance my life. That was very difficult to do. We're dealing with majority of Bangladeshis who are of low-income families, right? Low-income communities, lack of resources, linguistic abilities are limited. So a lot of things had to happen for us to even create this. How people in Bangladesh are going to make this change is up to them, right? So one thing I would like to say is whoever is watching and perhaps they're in Bangladesh or in the context of there, stop waiting for a savior. Just because we are here doesn't mean we're over here trying to save everybody. That is not the case, okay? I'm not going to be your knight in shining armor. That's not the point. The point is, if this is an ideology that you appreciate and you like and you want to see something more, then you are your own savior. And this conversation needs to happen more often with more people. So the one thing I would actually, I guess in terms of my perspective, one thing I would suggest to the people who are practicing dance, teaching dance of our culture, listen to the younger generation. Hear them out. We're not here to argue with you. We don't want to argue with you. We just want you to hear us out. We want you to understand that we want something better. We want to talk to you too, right? If we wanted to see something better, you can be a part of it. It's not a us against you in terms of generation, And that's a huge thing within the Bangladeshi culture. They don't want to talk and they don't want to speak. They don't want to collaborate. And even if they do, it's very hierarchical. It's like the people on top are people in their 60s or 50s or whatever, and then there's people in the bottom who are considered like bottom feeders who are like my age, and there is this lack of communication between the two, which is also not helping. So I really hope this communication gap becomes smaller. And I hope that people who have these criticisms, who are of the older generation or, whatever, I hope they come around. I really do, because these conversations need to happen more often. They need to happen more intimately so that more improvement can be seen.
Thank you, Shiriti. I think I often go to Rumi's one very powerful quote is that the power, that the wound is the place through which the light enters. So our wounds, our fractures, places where we are broken, I'm not glorifying pain. I'm not glorifying cruelty and suffering. At the same time, I personally, obviously, in my life journey so far, it's the time when I have fallen brutally flat on my faces, my broken bones, my shattered hearts, my tears. It has given me an understanding which probably I wouldn't understand otherwise. At the same time, one of the greatest educators of United States of America, a man that I deeply, deeply respect, honor, admire, I go back to him again and again. His name was Henry John Clark. One of the things he has tried to teach the Black people in America is that try to understand the Americans, they needed to erase your history. If they could not be made believe in their inferiority, if they could not cut their ties from their history. If you dig deep into it, I often see it, particularly in Bengali diaspora abroad, whether it is in America, Canada, Australia, what have you. We are struggling through a very difficult time. We are always hyphenated. We are never enough to be American. When you go to Bangladesh, then we are not enough Bangladeshi. We are suspended in a space between the spaces, not in hell, not in heaven, but in the purgatory, suspended. So it isn't easy for us. At the same time, what Henry John Clark tried to teach us, and also another very notable Black scholar, Marimba Ani, she abandoned her English name and she has taken the name from African culture, is that a tree cannot survive without the root. If I don't know the treasures of my own root, I will not be able to admire, respect, and appreciate any culture. So it is incredibly important, and this is what I try to teach my son all the time, is that, if you don't know your roots, history, and heritage and culture, trust me, my boy, you will go through a kind of crisis that no bread, a Mercedes can heal that wound. So a lot of the times I listen to Bangla song, or I don't know why, tears run down my cheeks. Then I understand the feeling that has been ignored for a long time is touched on. So I think to be able to take the courage to, I don't think we can heal ourselves if we don't take the courage to be vulnerable and to speak. And this is what I appreciate about Shiriti very often when she talks about, and I really respect you speaking when you are saying that where it is hurting. By hiding it, we'll not be able to heal it. We will have to speak about it. So, I admire your courage. I admire your straightforwardness. I admire, maybe we have misunderstanding, but if we don't talk, it's not going to happen. And this is what Edward Said said again and again. The job of the intellectuals is to expose what has been swept under the rug. So expose it, what's there. So Sriti, Heryka, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to talk and learn from you. And I look forward to engaging in future conversations with you. And Heryka, I've already told you that how we have classes, and Sriti, have also told you classes where the uh, young kids from the villages of Bangladesh, particularly, we meet. I invite both of you to come and drop by and listen to them, learn from them, teach them that how. I just want you to probably send your good energies that these young stars are fighting an uphill battle so hard, so hard. So to be able to give them this courage and insight and the root is incredibly important. If we don't, it's gonna be hard. So your conversation, your courage, your to be able to speak the truth unapologetically are very important. And I thank our listeners to listen to us and be part of this conversation. I wish you both a wonderful day. I know that both in American and Canada it's day now. So take care. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.